Perfect. Okay, so we were discussing where what were we discussing? Oh yeah, we were discussing where is this conversation happening, and what do we find in text 10? Senayor ubhayor madhye. What does that mean? If anyone has their Gita in front of them, the word for it, what does that mean? Yes, Nandan is showing something.
I was saying in the middle.
Yes, in the middle of the battlefield, right? So here we find another interesting insight, right? It's in the middle of the battlefield. It's in the middle of all of the conflict. It is for everyone, right? Now, not everyone would have heard it and appreciated it. Not everyone would have heard it and understood it, right? But it is there for everyone. So we find as well, we find that that real preaching spirit, if you will, of the Acharya. So here we find that. Wait, I just need to quickly adjust something. Give me 1 second. The wind blew my door open and I didn't want anything to fly in. Okay, so yeah, we find this. We find that that desire to preach. Now, coming back to the point about Guru Tattva, and Prabhupada's talking about the rejection of Guru, right? So this is something that unfortunately does happen, right? That's why it's mentioned in Shastra, right? So it's mentioned there, and it's there because not necessarily every guru is on the highest platform, right? Not necessarily everyone who, or each jiva which acts in that role is on the highest platform. However, it's still that same Guru Tattva acting through them, right? So insofar as they stop performing that role, they're no longer empowered to perform that role. But that while they're empowered to perform that role, they still do act in that role validly. Does that make sense? So it's not that if one person ends up ceasing the guru-disciple relationship, it's not that that person never acted as a guru, or that person never got anything, so to speak, from that guru, right? One can still be empowered by the Guru Tattva if somebody has faith in that individual, irregardless of their standing. Now, ultimately, one needs an Uttamadhikari, highest platform guru, right? But we can't even tell who is an Uttamadhikari and who's a Kanishtadhikari, right? We can't tell who's on the highest platform and who's on the lowest platform. We don't really have the eyes to see that. Ultimately, all of this is negotiated by faith. And that's why sometimes these sort of issues arise. But they don't mean that nothing substantial happened in that dynamic, right? Because often people will read that and they'll think, well, therefore, all of the time has been wasted, right? All of my time has been wasted because I was with I was with this individual and now I have to, cease this relationship, right? But that's not necessarily the case. Guru Tattva is far more dynamic than that, because Guru Tattva is not that you have some personality who's interacting with you, right? And this is the central point I want to emphasize before we move on, and we'll touch upon this again later, especially in chapter 4. Guru Tattva is not an individual person who is very advanced and teaches you things. That is not what a guru is, actually. Guru is actually a spiritual reality, right? The guru is actually Balaram, right? Now, we need to caveat that. It's not that the individual who is your guru is Balaram himself, but he is empowered by Balaram, right? So the Guru Tattva itself is this one singular force, if you will, this one singular energy, and this one singular empowerment, which is guiding people towards Krishna consciousness. And it is the empowerment of Balaram, right? And that empowerment can be manifested in different ways, but it is this guiding principle, right? And that's why Guru is ultimately one. We often hear this. Guru is one. It is not that there are many gurus, in the sense that there are many manifestations of the one singular Guru Tattva. In Sanskrit, we call this the Samasti Guru, right? The Samasti Guru is Balaram, that singular Guru Tattva, which is then manifested empowering all these individuals, right? That's why we read Vande Gurun, right? I pay all my respects to all my gurus, right? But all my gurus are just manifestations of the one guru tattva. That doesn't mean they're the one same person. They're different jivas empowered by the same guru tattva. So in this way, we should just, I'm just trying to drop some ideas that we'll later build on a little more. And in this way, we can understand also, so when issues come up, like say, that somebody falls into these unsavory things, we shouldn't be unrealistic. These things happen even in the current day. Bhakti-vinod Thakur, he discusses this, right? He discusses the etiquette of how this whole procedure should happen, right? If somebody is in such a situation. And it's a difficult procedure but it's also one based on not responding in anger or in aparad, right? Bhakti-vinod Thakur actually says if one is distancing oneself from a spiritual master, initially, they should bring up the issue to the spiritual master. And if the spiritual master is not reciprocal to the issue, then he should ask the spiritual master's permission, right, to take shiksha or guidance from another guru, right? And if the guru denies that, then only at that point should one end the guru-disciple relationship. But even up until the point of they're not even rectifying their behavior, right? Still, one should maintain their etiquette, right? And say, okay, well, at the very least, can I just go take the shelter of someone else, right? Can I be practically under the guidance of someone else? And then if they say no to that point, then there starts becoming an issue, right? Jiva Goswami also discusses this. But I just wanted to discuss that because sometimes people can get a little bit confused by why there is suddenly this talk of rejection of Guru, right? However, hopefully that's a situation that most of us will never have to really be in, right? We can all hope and pray, right, that won't be a situation. I was listening to a discussion with one sannyasi, and he had a guru, right? Well, he still has a guru. You never stop having a guru in spiritual life. His guru, who had given him sannyas, all of his initiations and all, he had some problems, let's say. And this sannyasi ended up having to leave the shelter of his spiritual master, it's painful for anyone, right? It's even more so painful if you're like a sannyasi, right? You've dedicated your whole life, every single moment of your existence, right, to your spiritual master, right? It's a very painful reality. And he was speaking about this, and he was asked rather directly. He was just asked, how do you feel about what happened? Because it was a pretty messy issue that resulted in this, right? And he said, how could I be angry at my spiritual master? How could I hold any resentment, right? How could I be ungrateful? I was searching for all sorts of things in my life, all sorts of nonsense, and he introduced me to Krishna. I was looking for all sorts of things, and he told me to look for Vraj, right? He told me to search for Krishna. He told me to search for Vrindavan. How can I be so ungrateful, right? To be upset at an individual who introduced me to all of these things, even if later on he was not fit to, continue that relationship. Still, he has given me the most important things in my life. He has introduced me to all of these important things. So how can I be so ungrateful, right? Even if he is not guiding me now all the way there, right? He still introduced me into the journey towards it. So how can I be so ungrateful, right? So like that, we can see some dimensions. It's not as abrupt as the purport might make it seem, right? It's not a violent separation. It's not something that results in effects. Yeah. So I just wanted to discuss those things because sometimes they're not discussed, but they are coming up in the purport. So what to do? So there's quite a few other points we can make about Guru Tattva, but we'll touch upon them later. This isn't going to be the last time we find Guru Tattva coming up in the Bhagavad-gītā, and I want to keep our momentum going. So then now we're going to have a rough overview of chapter 2, and we're really going to dive into chapter 2's context. So these two texts here, again, these are summaries that Prabhupada has given in his purports of the second chapter. Maybe Nitai Prabhu, would you like to read the first one?
Yep. This chapter instructs us in self-realization by an analytical study of the material body and the spirit soul, as explained by the Supreme Authority, Lord Sri Krishna.
Jai. And then maybe Mrugank Prabhu has gracefully joined us. So maybe Mrugank Prabhu, would you like to read the second quote?
Sure thing. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur has summarized the second chapter. Is that the right thing I'm reading?
Yeah.
Okay. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur has summarized the second chapter of the Bhagavad-gītā as being the contents for the whole text. In the Bhagavad-gītā, the subject matters are Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, and Bhakti Yoga. In the second chapter, Karma Yoga and Jnana Yoga have been clearly discussed, and a glimpse of Bhakti Yoga has also been given as the contents for the complete text.
So here we find a general conception of what we can expect from chapter 2. And as you guys get deeper and deeper into the second chapter, you'll realize that this is the case. It jumps through a lot of topics. In a sense, the second chapter is a table of contents for the whole Bhagavad-gītā, right? You're being introduced to the general overview of the whole text, which is why Srila Prabhupada calls it contents of the Gita summarized, right? In fact, the whole thing is so concise, you can almost take it like sutras, right? Each text is like a sutra capturing a real central idea of the Bhagavad-gītā. And it'll go really rapidly through. And the next few chapters then are really elaborating on the second chapter. It's almost like in an essay, right? I'm sure we've all had to write an essay once in our life. And when you write an essay, you introduce everything you're going to discuss, and then you discuss them. It's almost like that. I think Nandan Prabhu has probably written more essays than he wants to with his with his law degree. Yeah. Okay, so the second chapter, this is a rough overview. You can really break it down. I've broken it down even further, but I think the moment you start breaking it down even further than this, it gets really subjective. Like there's no real clear lines. Like there's a million. I've broken down 11 to 30 when we discuss it. There are like a trillion different ways I could have broken it down. I kept on revising how I've broken it down until I just realized. So don't think that the ways we break it down are really concrete, but these general overviews, I do think are relatively, they're relatively accurate, right? It's when we start breaking it down into smaller chunks that you can read it a million ways. So this is the general overview. The names up here, as before I said, I'll give some of the other names our acharyas give for this chapter. Sankhya Yoga is one name. Sankhya is like this philosophical deliberation. And the one that I'm more interested in is Atmanatma Vivek Yoga, being able to distinguish between the body and the soul, right? The yoga of being able to distinguish reality and the soul, right? Like that. Which, again, from our readings, we'll see is definitely a theme in this chapter. So we'll come to questions at the very end. So now we'll begin 11 to 22. And again, many people will say this is where Bhagavad-gītā becomes the Gita-upanishad. Now we are really entering into philosophical discourse. And Krishna, he begins, Shri Bhagavan Uvacha, Ashocyan Anvashoshastvam Pragyavadanscha Bhashase Gatasun Agatasunscha Nanusho Panditaha. He says, while speaking learned words, you are mourning for what is not worthy of grief. Those who are wise lament neither for the living nor for the dead. So here we have not the first words of Krishna, but definitely the first teachings of Krishna, right? Krishna has now begun teaching. We are now entering into the philosophy of the Bhagavad-gītā, explicitly mentioned. Although already, as we've discussed from the first chapter, there's already been so much philosophy that comes up indirectly, right? But now we're hearing direct philosophy. And there's something to be said of the circular nature of the Bhagavad-gītā. I've been talking about this a lot, how there's this real structure to it. What are the final teachings that Krishna gives in the Bhagavad-gītā? What's Krishna's final instruction? Who knows?
Surrender to me.
Yes. Sarva dharman parityaja mam ekam sharanam vraja ahantvan sarva papebhyo moksha yashyami. And then what? What does he say? Moksha yashyami. And then ma shucchaha. What does ma shucchaha mean?
Do not fear, do not lament.
Yes, do not fear, do not lament, do not worry. And yet, what is he saying? What is Krishna saying here? Nanushocanti. Do not lament, right? So Jiva Goswami, he very much emphasizes this. Again, we have another circle. Krishna begins his instructions with do not worry, do not lament, and he also ends them with do not worry, do not lament. We can see this as like the book ends, right, of the Bhagavad-gītā, right? He's introduced this with an instruction not to lament, and he is concluding it with an instruction not to lament. So we find that here. We find that not here, but we'll find that next. As I said, I've given this overview. When I send the slides, you can probably study it a bit deeper. I'm not too committed to this breaking down of it. I just wanted to show you all, for any of you that do the bracketing out work, to compare it against yours. I'll go to the next one. Here we go. So there's lots of circles in the Bhagavad-gītā. We've sort of covered the big ones that I like, but there's still more that will come up. It's a very circular text. So we'll find here 211 and 1866, Krishna's first instructions and last instructions are saying, do not worry, do not lament, right? And then the other ones we've already discussed, right? What are they doing on the battlefield, right? Is a question of what will happen. And that is answered in dharma-kshetri, kuru-kshetri, right? The weeds of the adharmic Kauravas will be taken out. And then, of course, also, what will happen? Well, in the final text of the Bhagavad-gītā, wherever there is Krishna, and wherever there's Arjuna, there will always be victory, right? So like this, we find the Bhagavad-gītā. It's a very circular text. Now, before we dive deeper into the text, I'm sure we all loved the purport smashing Mayavad, right? How did this is very much a focus, right, of these first few texts. So we're going to go until text 22 in this sort of section. And so I want to touch on the history of Mayavad for a bit before we go off and have our activity. Sorry, I've saved activity for later because I thought I'll do the info dump while you're all with it, and then I'll shake you all up again when you start getting a little tired with the activity. So firstly, I just want to discuss the history of Mayavad. Because it does come up as very, very important, very, very relevant in the purport. Who can tell me though, who can tell me roughly what the purports were discussing Mayavad, right? What was the contention? Just as a single line. What was the main contention in the purports of Mayavad philosophy?
Is it the fact that the individuality is retained or not?
Yes. Yeah. So it's about the individuality of the jiva and the constant distinction between the jiva, the soul, and the supreme personality of Godhead, right? And we might wonder, how could such an idea come up, right? I still remember one of my friends, one of my high school friends, he messaged me once out of the blue. I hadn't talked to this guy since like year 10, right? And he messaged me out of the blue and he was saying, hey, Tilak, you know about Vedanta, don't you? And then he started saying some weird Mayavad stuff, right? And he was saying, we're all islands on the ocean of love, or something just out there, right? Something just real wishy-washy. And it turns out he had done these psychedelic drugs, like some mushrooms, and he had eaten them, and then he had become convinced of Mayavad philosophy, right? He had become convinced. And I thought, after hearing that piece of information, I thought, yeah, that is true. You really do need to do drugs in order to have Mayavad make sense. It's so out there. You do need to fry your brain in order for Mayavad to be a reasonable philosophy. I don't think a sober-minded person really finds it too convincing, right? So we can sometimes wonder, how does this idea arise, right? How does this idea arise? So I want to go through the rough history of it, and then we'll have our activity where we'll do a little debate on Mayavad philosophy. So firstly, we begin with Buddha Dev, right? So Buddha, and there's some discussion about whether the Buddha that is being discussed here is the same Buddha as Siddhartha Gautama. I just haven't looked into it enough, so please don't ask that question. I'm undecided on the issue, whether there are two different, how many Buddhas there were in history, right? But if you go online, you'll find some people arguing different points. Each side has good arguments. So what happens with the Buddha, right? At the time, the Brahminical community, they were very, very much abusing the Vedic rituals, right? They were doing all these sacrifices. Why? In order just to satisfy their tongue, right? They were abusing and so they were sacrificing animals and everything in order to just get like a quick, nice meal, right? So they were doing all sorts of things. And this is natural for Kali-yuga. Srila Prabhupada actually writes in first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, when Shringi curses Maharaj Parikshit, Prabhupada writes that the corruption of the Brahmanas is actually what ushers in Kali-yuga. Because Kali, he's there, we are in the Kali-yuga, but it is only when Kali is able to enter into the hearts of the Brahmanas that Kali-yuga really can begin to corrupt the world, right? So it is a sign of Kali-yuga that the Brahminical communities are really decaying, right? And we can unfortunately see this today, right? Brahminical culture is almost non-existent, unfortunately, these days, right? So we find this is happening. And so Buddha, he comes and he says he is empowered by Krishna, right? So he's not directly Vishnu. Sometimes people think he's an incarnation, he's directly Vishnu. No, he's empowered by Krishna. He's a Shakti Avesha avatar, right? And so he's empowered by Krishna in order to preach against the Vedas, right? Because he wants them to stop being abused and he wants them to stop being used for all of the injustices that the Brahmanas were using them for at the time, right? So Buddha comes and he says, no need to believe in the Vedas, just do this, this, and this. And he establishes some basic ethical principles, right? And we can find this today in Buddhist schools, if we are to assume that Siddhartha Gautama is the Buddha being discussed here, which again, we'll find this, that actually people will attribute them to be atheists, right? And they actually are, right? But when you read the biographies of the Buddha, whenever he was asked, is there a God? He just wouldn't answer. Like he would just stop speaking. So it's interesting, right? If they are the same personality, it's interesting how that happened, right? He just wouldn't answer. They would say, is there an Ishvar? And he would stay silent. So interesting point. So we have it like this. And what happens is Buddhism explodes. All of India is Buddhist for a while. Yeah, please refer to my previous avatars. So Buddhism explodes. All of India is Buddhist at one point, right? The Vedic culture is virtually underground, right? Buddhism, all of the kings are Buddhist. Everyone becomes Buddhist, right? Very, very successful. Right? And we can find this reflected in this. Maybe Mrugank Prabhu can recite this shlok for us.
And you're putting me on the spot today.
It's Dasavatar Stotra, so it's the same one as now I'm mind blanking. They're Singa Pranam Mantra. It's that one.
Okay, I'm just gonna have a go. I don't know.
Yeah.
Ninda siyadnya vidaraha shuti jatam sadaritaya darshita pashughatam keshavadhrita buddha sharira jai jagadisha hare.
So this is written by by Jayadev Goswami. This is from the introduction to his Gita Govinda. I think for all of us, we can stop at the 10th shlok of that text, which is the last one of this, and then we can bench Gita Govinda for a while. It's a very rasic text, very much above most devotees' level. Okay, and then what does it say? O Keshava, O Lord of the universe, O Lord Hari, you have assumed the form of Buddha. All glories to you. O Buddha of compassionate heart, you decry the slaughtering of poor animals performed according to the rules of Vedic sacrifice. So what happens then is all of India becomes Buddhist, right? And not just all of India, Buddhism explodes. It's people often think of Christianity as exploding through missionary efforts. Like Buddhism did it first, right? Buddhism explodes around the world. It sends missionaries everywhere. You can find ancient Greek statues of the Buddha, right? Like Buddhism is all over the world. China, again, Greece, everywhere. You will find like religious movements beginning in Persia where they say, oh, Buddha was one of our prophets, right? So huge movement explodes all over the world. Now we have Shripad Shankaracharya, right? Now Shripad Shankaracharya, as we mentioned before, he is an incarnation of Śiva. And we'll discuss this on the next slide a little more. What happens is India now is covered in Mayavad, in Buddhist philosophy. This Buddhist philosophy, irregardless of what the original Buddha taught, it is a fact this Buddhist philosophy preached voidism. Voidism means nothing exists, right? It's much more complicated than that, but we're learning Bhakti-śāstrī, we're learning Vaishnava Bhakti-śāstrī, not Buddhist Bhakti-śāstrī. So we don't need to get too much deeper into it, right? So nothing exists, there is no soul, right? What is nirvana? What is salvation? It is to realize you don't exist and extinguish yourself. That's how they define nirvana. The way that Buddhists break down the word nirvana means the blowing out of a candle. Like it's blowing the soul out like a candle, extinguished, right? So Nandan is revolted by such ideas. So Shankaracharya, he is coming at this point. And why has Krishna sent him? Because Krishna is saying, well, I empowered Buddha as my incarnation in order to remove these abuses, right? But now we need to reestablish the Vedas, right? Because the Vedas are so very important. So Shankaracharya, he comes and he preaches a philosophy very similar to Buddhism. Very similar to Buddhism, different in a few key ways. It's sort of like a gradual step towards the Vedic truth, right? It's this halfway point. It is, you can say Shankaracharya was the first bridge preacher, right? So he's doing some form of extreme bridge preaching, right? And so he goes and he preaches, yeah, like these Buddhist ideas, they're great. But you know who does these Buddhist ideas better? The Vedas, right? And he goes around preaching this, and then we see this huge explosion again. And again, the majority of India now comes back under Vedic traditions. Why? Because Shankaracharya, he goes around and he perfectly just establishes all of this logic, right? I've mentioned here the three main differences we can find Shankaracharya has to Buddhist thought. Buddhists said that anatta, they say anatta, it means anatman in Sanskrit. Buddhists use Pali, which is a similar language to Sanskrit, but slightly different. So Shankaracharya said, no, there is a soul, right? But we're all that soul, right? Instead of voidism, nothing exists. He said monism, only one thing exists, and that thing is Brahman. And we are all Brahman. We are all that one thing that exists, right? We are only thinking we are separate, but when we realize it, we are all one. We are all this one singular substance named Brahman, right? And then obviously he argued also for the authority of the Vedas, which Buddhists rejected, right? These are the three main points I would say that Shankaracharya modifies. How is it similar? Well, it's impersonal, it stresses meditation, it stresses realization and renunciation, all of these things, right? It's similar to Buddhism in that way, and therefore everyone can sort of accept it. We find in the Padma Purāṇa a description, right? Just in case somebody thinks, oh, you Gauriya Vaishnavas, you're just revising it, saying that he was doing some preaching strategy. Actually, he was saying the truth, right? No, in the Padma Purāṇa, we can actually find this mentioned, that Śiva informs Durga, right? In the age of Kali, I take the form of a Brahmana and I explain the Vedas through false scriptures in an atheistic way, similar to Buddhist philosophy, right? So here we find it being mentioned. So Shankaracharya, he has done this, but Śiva, he is a Mahajan. He's actually a great devotee. So we should not think that Shankaracharya was deep down an atheist. And that's why we find Bhaja Govindam and other texts by Shankaracharya, which really reflect his devotional attitudes. What's interesting is Shankaracharya wrote an Ishopanishad commentary. And in this Ishopanishad commentary, lots of his followers reject it because they say, oh, no, this is too devotional. He couldn't have written it. So we'll find Shankaracharya is a great devotee, and we offer our full respects unto him. In Jaiva Dharma, Bhaktivinoda Thakur has one of the protagonist of the book, if you will, who is a learning devotee. He goes to this great devotee and he says, oh, Shankaracharya says this. And the moment he mentions him in a disparaging way, right? A dismissive way. Oh, Shankaracharya says this. And at the mention of the name Shankaracharya, the Babaji, he gives full Dandavat pranams, and he says, I will give my full Dandavat pranams to even the name of Srila Shankaracharya, right? So we get this idea. We have a strong respect for Shankaracharya. We just should understand what his position and his role was. we shouldn't really study his philosophy, because even Shankaracharya himself would rather that we didn't, if you get what I mean, right? We do it out of respect for Shankaracharya. We reject his ideas out of respect for him, not out of disrespect. Okay, now, how much time do we have left? Okay, yeah, we have time. So I'm going to split us into 2 breakout rooms. In these 2 breakout rooms, I want you all to prepare. There'll be one side that's arguing for Mayavad, and there's one side that'll be arguing against. If any of you feel uncomfortable doing this, Prabhupada always made his disciples do this, so we can know, therefore, it's a valid way of learning, right? Prabhupada, he would often make his disciples say, you know, you represent the atheists, you represent this, so don't feel that that you're doing something that's outside of our line by playing devil's advocate, so to speak, right? Prabhupada very much encouraged this. In order to get deeper into the ideas, right, he would encourage, let's try to take their side and then show how their side doesn't work. So one team, you'll try to represent Mayavad, and one team you'll represent well, what the Bhagavad-gītā actually teaches. So if we can base this on the Bhagavad-gītā, which is where I hope your readings came into handy, I'll give you 10 minutes to prepare, so you can go over the text and think it out. Yeah, we'll do that. So I'll split you all into 2 groups, and one of you has to try and present some good Mayavad arguments, and the other one of you has to try and present good, well, yeah, exactly what the Bhagavad-gītā teaches. Good luck to the team that's representing Mayavad, okay? Because that's going to be hard, right? But try your best, because we want you to try your best, so then we can smash your ideas, right? Okay. So I'll give you 10 minutes to prepare, and then we'll come back, and then we'll maybe have 5. We'll see how long it goes. We won't do a full proper debate structure, like we won't have first speaker, second speaker, third speaker, but maybe have a few people. We'll only have one person from each group to speak. So you can nominate within your group, like, you know, who will speak however, but we'll take turns with one person from each group speaking, and we'll at least have 1 or 2 people. I mean, we'll at least have three people from each team speaking, right? But you don't need to worry about structuring it like formal debates are, because I just don't want to, you know, explain how formal, you know, debates are structured. And I think it's unnecessary. So we'll break out into the 2 breakout rooms. Is everything clear before we go into the breakout rooms? Clear as mud? Okay, I'll make the breakout rooms, and then I'll jump into each breakout room and let you know which side you're on. That's not what I wanted to do. I wanted to pause. Okay, I think let's give the Mayavadis the first word, so that we can have the Vaishnavas have the last word. Okay, who's going to speak first from Team Mayavad?
I speak on behalf of Mayavadis.
Okay, John.
I appreciate how the moderation's already been rigged against us. But so the first point that we have against this in this philosophy, which presupposes individuality, is that herein we have Krishna speaking to Arjuna, and they say that Krishna has his individuality. But if he is the Lord, and the Lord is unlimited, they are supposing that this Bhagavan is all contained within a singular body of Krishna, thereby limiting his the Lord. He's no longer unlimited, but limited into a certain form. And therefore, such an argument of individuality would not coexist with the unlimited nature of the Lord. That's our first argument. Should I continue?
If the other side has a counter argument, then they can go ahead. Otherwise, Nandan Prabhu, you can keep laying out your arguments until.
The second point is in the very next verse, Krishna says, "Dehinosmin yatha dehe." The word dehina is not many souls, but is one soul, and therefore emphasizes the individual Brahman, which is all of us. It's unlimited, and all of us are part of that one individuality. And so the dehina, which is unlimited. This third argument is if one goes to verse 28, The verse is Avyaktadani Bhutani Vyakta Madhyani Bharata. All created beings are unmanifest in their beginning, manifest in their interim state, and unmanifest again when annihilated, showing that the unmanifested nature is actually within the Brahman and not in some kind of individual state of being, which is what the Vaishnavas want us to believe, which we shouldn't, and we should take this argument. For example, you get a tree, right? You have a tree and you cut off the branch of a tree and you stick it in the ground. That tree again grows into another tree. So was it one soul within the tree or many souls? No, it's just all of us are contained within the one Brahman, splitting up. That is the basis of our argument.
I love the transition from Mayavad to Achintya Bheda Bheda at the end. Okay, let's have who's the speaker from the Vaishnav side?
I am.
Oh, Jai.
Okay, thank you,
Nandan
Nandan.
Prabhu's about to have not only his gross body, but also his subtle body destroyed by the real force of Rohan Prabhu's
No, he's
argument.
not.
Aren't they all one though?
Okay, Nandan, thank you. Those good points. The first one you said was that the form of Bhagwan is limited. So I would counter that by saying that the soul in itself, which is a part of Krishna, a minute part and parcel, is Satchitananda. It is a pure part. So saying that it is a contamination of Bhagwan isn't true. The other thing you said was that when we enter Brahman, we lose our individuality. However, that is not true as well, because Prabhupada mentions constantly that even from Brahman, there's a chance that we can fall. So this individuality is always remained. So I'd just like to bring up all the points that my team made so we can continue the debate. So if we believe that Mayavad theory is that, one second. We are separated by Maya or illusion, and we merge into the impersonal Brahman and lose individual existence. It is not true, because it says that those who are seers of truth have concluded that there is no endurance of the eternal soul. There is no change. And 212 is really the crux of our argument, where it says that we are eternally individual. Everything rests on me and nothing is before me. And Krishna also mentions that Brahman is subordinate to him. So there is a distinction between Krishna as a personality and Brahman as the energy of Krishna. Thank you.
Okay, are there any speakers from Team Mayavad who are going to respond to this?
I just ask you one point, Rohan Prabhuji. Thank you for that. I'll say that because you are referring the Prabhupadas, because Prabhupada is writing all these things and you're following Prabhupada's teachings. Hence, you are quoting that, but we don't believe that in what Prabhupada is saying. So, because we are all Brahman, we are all part of Brahman. So, how do we refute that one?
Nice point. Nice point.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, is it the next speaker or Rohan again?
Please go.
Moderator.
Sorry, I thought you were taking, Rohan said, please go. So I think we'll take that as the indication.
Yeah, sure. So the opposition is saying that we're only saying the individual soul is not the unified Brahman because we believe in Srila Prabhupada. However, that would entail that we made this argument on the authority of Srila Prabhupada, but that's not the case. We're making arguments based on Shastra, and that's not necessarily based on the authority of Srila Prabhupada's statement. So I don't understand how that point really would make sense. Secondly, I want to refute a few more points that the opposition has made. They said that if Krishna has a body, isn't that limiting an all-pervasive Brahman into a small body? But actually, that's just the material conception of form being limited, being imposed upon Krishna. If Krishna is actually the ultimate supreme, then he is not limited whether he is infinitely existing or existing in a body. So we can't impose such restrictions upon them. The opposition said that Dehina doesn't mean many souls, but one soul, which is Brahman. Actually, the Dehina is referring to the person within the soul within the body. And that doesn't actually go here or there in stating whether or not there's one soul or many souls. So I don't think that point really stands. All living beings are manifested in the beginning, unmanifested in the beginning, manifested in the interim state, and unmanifested at the end. Again, this is taking what a statement, which in the context of what's being spoken, is speaking about the life force seeing within a material body. And it's taking that completely out of context and referring, and somehow plastering that onto this Brahman idea, which you haven't really done very well. So I think that's quite I don't think that's a great point. And then one soul within the tree or many souls, I thought that was a bit schizophrenic. I don't really think that made any sense. I would like to make more points regarding how we have formulated our arguments based on what Krishna is actually saying. First of all, Krishna says in chapter 2, text number 12, that never was there a time when I didn't exist, nor you, all these kings, and never will there be a time when all of us should cease to be. Krishna is saying that we were individuals in the past, we are individuals currently, and we will continue to be individuals in the future. That by itself completely refutes any kind of conception that we're going to lose our individuality. Now, if the Mayavadis are going to come and say that, if the Mayavadis are going to come and say that the individuality is material, then what you're saying is Krishna has a material body in saying that we are always individuals. What that would then mean is that if Krishna has a material body, then he has the same flaws as us. Then why are we sitting here listening to Krishna and taking what he says seriously? Unless we believe Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, in which case his argument stands. Furthermore, Krishna spends a lot of time in the Bhagavad-gītā saying very clearly how Brahman is different from him. For example, in chapter 14, Krishna says, Brahmano hi pratishtaham. I am the pratishtha, or the resting place of Brahman. So how can I have come from Brahman if Brahman is resting in me? It's kind of like saying, you are your child. But if you say that the child depends upon me, then how can you be your child? Or I've come from your child, which is ridiculous. Again, Nandan, please wait your turn before you're gonna say something. You've already spoken. If you had to make a good point, you should have said it in the past. All right, anyway. Lastly, I just want to say, in chapter 7, and these are Krishna's words, so don't be insulted if I just repeat what Krishna is saying. Krishna says, those who are abuddhayaha, or unintelligent, think that I have come from the unmanifested and have now assumed a form. They do not know my original nature, which is the Lord of all that be. So actually the Supreme is the original, and the unmanifested comes from the manifested. So I just want to make the point here, the opposition is just not really making a point. If you want to have a serious argument, please say something that's logical and based on the Bhagavad-gītā. Over and out.
Acharya Singha Jai.
Prabhu, I have one question, Prabhu.
We are happy to be defeated, Prabhu.
No, not yet, Prabhu. Not yet. I think.
Okay, I'll let you go.
Not yet. Prabhu, we are staunch Mayavadis, as you know. Prabhu, the question which Nandan Prabhu said that you did not understood, which is whether the tree had one life or more than one. I just extend that a bit. I have a succulent plant called jade. It's one plant. We all agree that the plants also have life of some form. Unless we want to contradict that, then it's a different matter. But let's say it has. I can take each leaf of that plant, put it in a soil, and it becomes another plant. If plant has a life, then the new plant also has a life, and one can become 100. Mayavadi argument is it's all the same. It's all the same consciousness. It's same all one, and hence there is no need to explain. And hence it explains the argument of Mayavadi that it's just the consciousness dividing and merging into all in one. So Prabhuji, please explain that. So the first thing is, do you believe the plant has a life? If plant has a life, then only this starts, unless we refute that.
I think because that was targeted in Mrugank Prabhu can reply, unless somebody else from the team wants to reply.
Okay. I had a question. So is your argument that we merge into the plant, or do we merge out from the plant? Because yes, you can separate the plants, but I thought your argument was that we put we all want to become one, right? So my argument is, can you put all the leaves together into one plant? and make it one soul?
No, it's the in the Mayavadi, it's keep on transferring. It keep on one to another. Like it's just you merge into Brahma, you can come back into.
Yeah, but are you merging the plants all together and making it one whole plant? Or
No, the argument is not if you are merging
okay.
back you're not going backward in time. Time moves forward. So it has the new consciousness has come in, or the consciousness.
So your argument is that you're merging out of Brahman, not merging into the Brahman.
No, we all are Brahman. All the matter is in fact part of Brahman. Everything is part of Brahman. In the end, there is just Brahman, just the consciousness, which is
but you saying that it's just one coin, but I don't know, your argument keeps going towards it's becoming one, but your examples say it's become many. I'm just not understanding that, maybe. So maybe I'm just not understanding it. So maybe you
yeah, Prabhu, the plant, okay, let's take a step back. Plant has a life, do we agree, Prabhu?
Yes.
Okay, I have taken a leaf of that plant, I have put it in a soil, and that becomes two now.
Yep.
Yes, Prabhu?
Yep. So is that the conclusion of your
one Atma or many Atma?
Are you asking us or are you telling us?
Yeah,
No, I'm asking. From me, like it's like from Mayavadi's point of view, the Atma is all one. So it doesn't matter if you have one out, 100 plants came out of one. But from your argument, Atma is separate. So if it is plant only had one Atma, then where did the second plant came from?
So you're saying one thing can't come out of another thing? Is that what you're arguing?
But here it hasn't come out of other thing. I've just broken a leaf, put it in the soil, and it came out.
So you broke the leaf, and is it not possible to have two separate leaves and
So
coming from the one or origin leaf?
Should I consider that as a birth?
I'm just having difficulty actually understanding your argument still. So maybe.
See, I think what you're doing is you have a premise and then you're going to a conclusion, but the link doesn't really happen. Like, I don't think your premise leads to the conclusion.
My premise is that original plant had one Atma is not relevant. That is my premise.
Why is it not relevant?
Because
you said it's alive, right? If something's alive, it has to have Atma.
Sorry?
If something's alive, it has to have an Atma, it has to have a soul.
But Mayavadis, it's all the one Atma.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean, okay, Mayavadis can say whatever they want. We want a logical conclusion. You can't just say Mayavadis say, well, Vaishnavism says that there's two Atmas, so why isn't that true?
No,
essentially, I think the argument is one of pervasiveness, the pervasive nature of the Brahman. So essentially, I think what Prabhu is saying is that the plant itself is pervaded by the energy of the Brahman. Likewise, we all pervaded with the energy of the Brahman. If you take one, I wouldn't use the human body as an example, but it's a plant example because it works for a plant. It doesn't work for us. So maybe that's a bit of an issue for us, Tarun. But with the plant, you can take a leaf and you can put it in. Essentially, what he's saying, that pervasive nature of the Brahman is still continues with the taking of the leaf into the soil. That's the nature of the argument. But the issue here is, and I'm sorry to be arguing for the other side here, but I can't help but see that all this does is it presents a ripe nature for another body, for another soul to enter into. So.
Because the point is, if it was the same Atma going into the new plant, then if you killed that plant, then the first plant should also die.
No, you cannot kill. That is the whole point.
But things die. What do you mean you can't kill? Things die.
Ultimately, I think what resolves this is that if we understand the Atman to be consciousness, and we do, right? Everyone will agree. Very simply, if it was all the same consciousness, I would be experiencing what Mrugank Prabhu is experiencing right now. The very fact that I am not experiencing what it is like to be Mrugank Prabhu or Tarun Prabhu or something shows that there is some division in this consciousness, because pure Brahman, pure Atman is consciousness, right? There is some division in this consciousness, because if I was infinite consciousness, I would be experiencing everything, right? And if this was the case, then we would see perfected, yes, Mrugank Prabhu also putting, why would Krishna have to speak the Gita if he's the same as Arjuna, right? Because he would be having the same experience as Krishna, right? So I think, but even then, even if we don't speak of realization, the fact that I'm not having the full experience of what it is like to be everyone else shows that my consciousness is distinct from other people's consciousness. And then if it's distinct, then it must mean there is some separation in this Atma. Does that make sense?
Yes, Prabhuji.
Because that second plant is a distinct plant, right? If you took those two plants or whatever, right, and put them separately, they will have different experiences and they will learn differently. They will respond to different things, right? They will not respond in light of each other, right? So there are two separate instances of consciousness. If they were the one consciousness, they would respond in the same way, right? They would respond informed of each other's experience, which they do not. At least that's what I would say. So I think, we again, Vancha Kalpa for going over time, but I hope we enjoyed that. I think we've all come to the very satisfactory conclusion that it is very hard to support Mayavad ideas. That was what I'm hoping we were taking away from this. Mayavad is very Nandan Prabhu. Yeah. So much garbage, exactly. That's why I brought up the example of my friend who did those drugs and then became a Mayavadi, because you really need to fry your brain for it to make sense, right? No, Mrugank, don't apologize. We were all playing roles, right? I don't think anyone was unironically supporting Mayavad. So, you were smashing them like we should smash Mayavad. Okay. So is there anyone who has some final points to get off their chest regarding that, or is that all? Okay, then we'll conclude on that. Nandan Prabhu, you had your question from earlier on. If you'd like, I can answer it now. Otherwise, I can answer it next week if you remind me.
I think next week, just because I think everyone's got things and I don't want to trouble them. I think we might be in a better position to understand next week. Yeah.
So I'll touch upon it before we start the class next week, like first thing. Sorry to have delayed the question. But yeah, next week we can touch on it. It is a really good question. So I do want to discuss it. Okay, so with that, you can go back and forth for a while, but ultimately I think we got the general gist that Mayavad makes no sense, right? And the Bhagavad-gītā is very, very explicitly supporting personalism and the individualism of the soul. We'll go deeper into that next week. What's the homework? I think, what was the last text you guys got up to?
35.
So 35. I'm just trying to. So if you got up to 35, wait, did I set it to 35? I thought I set it to 37. Yeah, 37. Then maybe read 38 to 46 too much? No, I think 38 to 46.
Yeah.
Okay. So thank you all for participating. Hope you enjoyed that debate. Hope you now realize even more so Mayavad doesn't make sense. Very, very happy to see the Mayavad team lose, as I'm sure the Mayavad team is happy. But I in one sense they didn't lose because they did a good job of representing it. It's just very hard to represent the 2 + 2 = 22. So so they did the best job possible. So very good for everyone. I'll see you all next week, and we will continue discussing them. Okay. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripasindubhya eva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Śrīla Prabhupāda ki jai.